All right, we are connecting. So, hi everybody. I'm Toddy. I'm back again. I am really excited. I'm actually here with Caroline Hain, who I met virtually during COVID. And I wanted to bring her on to talk to you because I'm just like super impressed by her story. It's just, I find all these people that I've met over the course of the last year that just inspired me to do, more things. And just real quickly, she's a military spouse with a couple of babies who has moved from being in teaching to being an instructional designer. So I did this once. I was a military spouse with a baby, and I don't know that I could have made a career change. So Caroline, just, real quick, I mean, we were the short session, but tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I know you just recently moved again, didn't you?
Yeah. So I was taught for about 8 years. Last year, I think it was around this time, my husband left, and I just found out I was pregnant. I had almost 2-year-olds. I think she was about 1.5, and I was just like, okay, I'm already kind of burnt out from teaching. We know that my husband is going to be going to pilot training. We're going to be moving at the end of the year. And so I want to go with him because this is going to be about a 2-3 journey. And I need to be able to find a job where I can, help provide for my family, stay home with my kids at that point. And I want to be with my husband. So it was kind of like, how do I do this? What can I do? Because I love learning. I love being able to help people learn and educate. And so I had gotten a degree in instructional design, mainly because I wanted that bonus with that master's stuff you get in teaching. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize I could do much with it until last year. And I was just like, this is perfect. And we can work from home. I'm sold. So over the course of last year, I started learning the skills, learning how to transfer my skills on top of knowing those knowledge gaps and the skill gaps, and made that switch at the end of this year. And now I landed a role as a full-time instructional designer. So
wow,
so exciting.
That is awesome. So did the pandemic play into this as well?
It did, mainly because I knew with the pandemic, that I could work from home. This wasn't just a fairy tale that I could be. And then the pandemic actually helped me focus on this switch. I couldn't go anywhere. Yeah. I was pregnant. I had this daughter. Everything was locked down. So what did I do? I busted my butt all summer and trying to do this. And I think with the pandemic, you realize that there's a lot more out there than I ever thought, that I ever can give myself credit for. Because as I was looking at all these job postings, I was like, this is probably going to be something that is going to be around for a bit, because we don't know how COVID was going to play out or how it's still playing out, and that possibly that this could be something that even continues after COVID, being able to, work from home. A lot of these companies are realizing that they can save money by having these e-learnings and, these virtual instructor-led, that it works. And I've seen it I'm more productive when I work from home. I don't have all these other distractions. And I think a lot of these companies are realizing that too. So COVID basically just kind of gave me that extra motivation to get all this stuff done, because I had nothing else to do with my time.
Well, you just had little kids.
Pregnant and a 2-year-old.
Yeah. So I've been working outside of an office, I'd say since about 2012. I have gone back into work for offices, but I've done kind of a blended model up until COVID. And, there've been times when I worked exclusively from home. So, given the fact that this has been happening for a long time, I think you're right. I think that the work from home is here to stay. And now companies are starting to adopt that mindset that, yes, we actually can do this. And you and I know about a space where you really can't do this. And that's in classified learning with respect to the military. My husband's actually encountered that. But, it's funny how you can adapt to even work around things like that. And come up with scenarios where you can get 1 or 2 people into those areas so they can actually do what they need to do. And then, segregate out the learning and say, okay, this is the stuff that we can teach that doesn't have to be in those areas. So, that's probably the most limited case I can ever think of in terms of, how do you develop learning that is remote, and what are the limitations? So this is super cool. Okay, so tell me, what skills did you have to develop? I'm curious, because if you had the ID degree, you already probably had all the base knowledge.
Yeah. So I had to one of the challenges coming from teaching into ID is, letting people know that like I can work with adults. Like I know how adults think, like I know how. So one of the things that I kind of had to touch up on was like those adult theories. Like I knew about them from my like ID degree, but it was like in practice because I was teaching high schoolers and they're more like freshmen. And then some of the other skills were like those e-learning tools, like Articulate, like being able to use Camtasia. Like I had never until last year touched them. Like I had never seen them. I had never even heard of them. And so last year I was building storyline modules. I fell in love with Rise. I know people are not always a Rise, but like I absolutely love that.
It's cool.
And so it was just a lot about like learning how to do that e-learning and being able to use those software programs. And
yeah, it's so
trying to
important.
like,
well, and they're accessible now too. Like I mean, as long as I've been in this field, we were creating things with JavaScript. I mentioned to you I was a trainer for the Army robotic systems, and we created an online course that was a prerequisite to the soldiers coming in and training on the actual robots. And so everything was done in JavaScript. So I managed a team of programmers at that time. So, but now you just pick up a tool and do it on your own. So, and even things like virtual reality and stuff, where we might have had to have a team of programmers to teach somebody how to do a simulated learning, station or something, to drive a vehicle or something like that. We can actually create a lot of that now with the tools we have, and they're accessible. That's super cool. So they're fun too, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, I actually, one of the ways that after kind of building some samples for my portfolio, I ended up creating like a Christmas game for my daughter in Storyline. I shared that out on LinkedIn. It was like a Santa game, and it was like using numbers and colors. And so that really kind of helped build up my skill and kind of always learning more about like what I can and can't do, testing those limitations.
Very cool. So what's your favorite tool?
I like Rise. Because you have kind of like that web base, but then you can add storyline into. So like you can have like the best of both worlds. You can be able to use Rise and then like let's throw a storyline in here as well. So you have that ability like to kind of scroll down, keep it short, sweet, and simple, and then add in those different, like you can do like those branching scenarios, just kind of interactive, more interactions than you can get with like those blocks too.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really nice tool because everything lives out on a cloud, unless of course you're working for somebody who won't use a cloud-based tool. But I wouldn't know anybody like that right now.
Yeah, no, not at all. The military is not like that,
or their contractors. Okay, so what did you most helpful though? Like when you were trying to learn, like was there a person or a service or?
So I actually joined a coaching program. So there's a coaching program that I came across on Facebook. Jill Davidian helped that, and so she took me under her wing, joined her coaching program, and it was fantastic. I got a lot of one-on-one with her, and so she would go through my module. She would kind of go through my storyline. She helped rewrite like my resume because as teachers, sometimes those keywords in what we do as teaching doesn't always translate into like corporate instructional designers. And I think that sometimes we need that extra support in being able to say, this is what you can do, because I know you can do it.
Yeah.
How do you show someone, or how do you like tell someone that you have those skills? Because a lot of the interviews that I went on, one of the first questions that they would ask me is, so as a teacher, like how can you do instructional design? And so like I have to prove to them that I have the knowledge, like I have these skills, I have the ability to develop them. I think like the first couple of interviews that I did, that was like the very first question. And once I started talking, like I could see in their faces that they were like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. So
good for you. Knock down that myth.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it just had to like also be a mindset, because I would hear that question and it would doubt me. Like I would doubt my skills in knowing that I can do that. Because if people don't think that I can do it, kind of plays like a little trick on you. But, I would do like these daily affirmations. Like I'm an instructional designer. Like I have these skills. I know what I can do. And once I was able to actually confirm that with me when I got those questions, it was just like wham, bam, out of the park. Like you're not
Cool.
going to pull one over me. Like, I'm going to get this.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to the interviews that I used to have as well. And of course, I transitioned from a tech writer to instructional designer. People questioned me. And so, I would tell them stories, going back to Sarah's storytelling, I would tell them stories of how I built something and what played into it and what decisions I made. And, once you start kind of going down that path, they're like, all right, yeah, okay, we get it. You know what you're talking about. So what was the hardest part for you? I mean, everything, there's a lot going on.
There was a lot. And I think on top of, having the kids, I think it was being able to really kind of focus on making sure that, like, when I would, as teachers, like, I know how to answer these interview questions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to expect in an ID interview. Like, so I think some of the hardest parts was, like, I knew I mastered my skills. Can I master an interview? Because I think that that's sometimes, like, the hardest part is I know that I'm an awful interviewer. Like, I stumble on words. I sometimes want to just respond way too quickly because, like, I can think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really needed to focus on, like, slowing down my pace, writing down possible answers before I went on an interview, kind of outlining possible questions, looking at what was on my resume and making sure that I could articulate that when I'm talking to someone because they've seen it here. Can I tell them about it in an interview? Can I tell them about it in the question? So I use that STAR method. So that really helped me. Yeah. And so I just, once the summer passed and I got those skills, it was really kind of focusing on building that confidence in knowing how to respond to these interview questions. Because I think that once I can land an interview, that's the biggest step. But now if I want to land that job, how can I not only show to you on paper, but prove to you through the way our conversations that this is something that I want and that I can do.
Right. Yeah, interestingly enough, because as Sarah talked about building out story scenarios, I was thinking, oh, that's what I've been doing with interviews for years. I would actually have kind of a set of stories that I would ready to present if I got X question, and so it's such a relevant point that you make, though, that, this isn't just about making the transition to a new job skill set. It's about, making a transition to, like, a whole new set of interviewers. And, it's a completely new. So that's part of the reason I have you on here is I want to inspire people. We've had a number of people over the year, especially since COVID, kind of locked everything down, who've made these transitions. And so, to be able to see somebody like you do what you're doing, I want this to be inspiring to others. So
yeah,
very cool.
It's so possible. We as teachers sometimes doubt ourselves. We just hear all the time that, like, if you can't do, you teach. And so, like, that's not we have all of these skills. We have all of the abilities that we can do more than stand in front of the classroom. I can show you this. I can do this. And the first week of my job, like, I was just offering all of these different solutions and they've all been implemented. And they're just like, where have you been? I'm like, I was hanging out in the classroom, now I'm coming over here. So I think that once we show them what we're capable of doing, there's a lot of reception. Like, yeah, that's so great. Like, I know that at least in my role, Kahoot is huge. I'm like, oh, I don't know how long I've been doing that. Like, why don't we try this program? And they're like, oh,
that's cool.
I'm like, yeah. So like, teachers, you can do it. It is possible. We have these skills. Let's just be able to translate them. Like, how can we use the corporate lingo with what we already know? And there's just, we have that. I don't I know I'm repeating myself, but, like, I think that sometimes we just need to hear it. Our skills are already there. Let's figure out how we can translate that. Let's figure out what words we can use instead of parents or lesson plans or, pacing guides. Like, there are so many ways that I see that every day, like course or training modules or stakeholders, very, very similar.
So what advice would you give to somebody making that transition? I mean, should they get more familiar with corporate terms? Should they get more familiar with the corporate environment?
I think both. I think when you know how your skills transfer over, you are more confident in knowing what you can do in that corporate environment. If I know that your analysis is very similar to a pretest, if we're collecting that data to see what we already know, yeah, like let's get familiar with what corporate uses in terms.
Yeah.
And let's make those connections and let's really become familiar with how corporate operates. I know that teaching, sometimes you work in like groups, or sometimes you're working individually, but in corporate you've got a bunch of different people that like you need to report to. So becoming familiar with, you have a great idea, but we just can't automatically implement it. We have to kind of go up that step. But sharing out your thoughts and ideas using that business lingo. And I think that once teachers have that lingo down, your resume, your interview questions are going to completely change, and they're going to change for the better.
And it's also good to understand the limitations are too going into corporate, that you're going to be dealing with adults, stakeholders who probably also have other work, or they have very specific, protocols that they have to do in terms of reporting. And I know one of the things I was doing last year when I would talk to teachers making the transition is say, if you haven't ever dealt with any kind of software development process, it's not a bad idea to understand how software gets developed within a company, because there's a really large chunk of companies out there that are hiring that do exactly that. So they tend to put instructional designers into that process, as software gets developed and rolled out, and then trained to either the internal users or gets trained out to, the general public. And so, that's not something that most people think about. But, I think I hope that it was good advice. I know it got one person a job. So, but, it's like Kara mentioned project management this morning. Same thing. It's probably an innate skill as a teacher because you've been managing yourself, but, project management can be a more formal practice within a company. So, those are things you can really kind of hone in on. So are you working all remote right now?
Yeah, I'm all remote. And I think earlier today we found out it's probably going to stay all remote. I was lucky enough that when I took my job, there was that stipulation that I said, my husband and I are going to be moving a lot with the military. I won't be able to come into office until that's finished, and it could be a couple of years. And they're like, that's fine. We want you. So we're going to make this work.
That's not that good. That's awesome.
Yeah, because at one point, like I kind of rescinded my application process when I found out that they possibly might have to go. But I said, you know what, like that's not what I'm looking for right now. I need something that's going to be remote. I need to be able to move with my husband. And they said, well, we want you for this job after everyone that we've interviewed. So we're going to make that happen.
That's really awesome.
And our team's thriving in the remote environment. And so we've kind of found out that we don't think that we're going back anytime soon. And I love it. Like my daughter was sick last week and I had to pick her up from daycare, and my team's just like, okay, go get your daughter. Whereas like with school, like I'd kind of be like frantically, okay, do I have my lessons planned? Do I have my sub? Like what's going to happen? Are they going to get off? Like, and I didn't have to worry about any of that. Like I logged in the next day and I didn't have to like think about where I needed to like pick me up or carry on. Like I just was like, starting again. And my team's so supportive. They're just like, if you need to take the day, take the day. Like if you need to take tomorrow, take tomorrow. Like take care of your daughter. Like it's such a family first, which is so different. Like I honestly think that I'm living in an alternate reality, like in this job, because it's like teaching like students first, like make sure that like everything's there. Where here it's just like my family comes first, and they understand that like, if I'm running late, like that's okay. Like my husband's sick today. And so like I told them earlier, I was like, hey, like I'm going to be in and out. I told them about this and they're just like, okay.
So just in retrospect, I'll tell you, I think that some of that giving others grace has certainly come out of COVID.
Yeah.
I've worked for really good companies where basically it was never a problem to even leave the facility, go do personal things like doctor's appointments or kids. But I've also worked for folks that, weren't quite so, helpful about it. But I think that, we've all come about, understanding that everything's very different in COVID. And I think that we're willing to give each other grace, because what else are we going to do? I mean, like, this is my office. This is my restaurant. This is, where. So you are now living in Enid, Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay.
We went from Virginia now to Oklahoma. We'll be here I don't know how long. And then our next stop will be New Mexico for who knows how long.
Oh,
And
wow.
then I
Yeah.
think back to Pennsylvania, where he'll finish up his training. So we're
Yeah.
lucky enough to know the plane that he'll be flying, so we can kind of guess where we're going to be and how long it's going to be.
That's cool.
So it's nice for family. We can kind of plan out where things are going to go. But I'm enjoying Oklahoma. I'm enjoying all of the allergies that our family has now been
And
impacted by.
it's very flat there because I lived in Oklahoma City and it was very flat.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You can see forever.
Yes.
I'm a little hesitant when storm season's starting to roll around. So.
Yeah, I'll give you some tips on those too. Yeah, 'cause actually, I worked for a radio station in Oklahoma City, and you could see those giant storm clouds rolling towards you, and thinking, "I hope that does not turn into a tornado."
Yeah.
But, you plan ahead on those things. So, but
Yeah.
interesting, and you get that red dust that kicks up, and you get really good sunsets too. So,
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing that like now working flexible and with COVID, like people know that you have a life and
yeah,
like that things that they're a lot more willing to say like, we're in a storm right now, my Wi-Fi is kicked out. I'll jump on when I can, and they trust me because they know that I can do my work. And I think COVID
yeah,
has really shown, I think as you mentioned, like the humanity, like really respecting that people can, if you give them the chance, create this work-life balance
absolutely,
as long
yeah.
as you don't micromanage them, put the faith in that your employee's going to do what they need to do to succeed.
Yeah, American productivity has skyrocketed in the last year. And I think that's, partly because we've changed our work habits, which is good and bad because, we had to build, some networks. But, it's definitely been interesting to see how much more people will dedicate themselves to, hey, I got to log in and make up for that hour I lost, or get that work done. So it's all good. Well, and I totally relate. I was a military spouse as well through I won't say flight school because it was, back end or AWACS flight school. So, but very cool. So, yeah, I mean, you're an inspiration to me, and I know you're an inspiration
Thank
to
you.
others. Where can people reach you? I mean, are you on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I want to say it's linkedin.com/Caroline Hain, my name.
Excellent.
I know that if they are connected with you, that we're connections. So hopefully maybe
Yep.
we'll pop up there. But
Yep.
I do like to post I like to give a lot of rise tips, a lot of just kind of inspiration. I know that for a bit, you and I connected when I was talking about my
Yep.
struggles with my husband being gone. I think one of the best things about LinkedIn is I can be transparent and open, and this field is so supportive. Like you reach out to me, you're like, here's my number, please call me. And like that meant so much to me because like no one can really understand like what's going on. Getting a little teary-eyed here because like this community just means everything. Like it was awesome.
It's a wonderful community, and that's the value of what I've gotten from TLDC. It's amazing, 5 years into it now, and it's my tribe, and, it's definitely been a lifeline for me for the last year. And so I've actually brought others into, actually one of my husband's former flying cohorts has been in some of our sessions today too. So, those connections you make as a military spouse stay with you. And then, hopefully you can bring, things to them as well as, you encounter new things in your life, new ways to make money, new ways to work, so it's a sharing community for sure. And we care about seeing others, succeed. I think that's, I call it a fault of people in learning development. So, well, excellent. So be prepared for people to connect to you
Please do.
be sure, to check us out on the TLDC, the regular cast as well. And everybody, reach out and say hi to Caroline. And it's been wonderful to talk to you. And thank you so much for sharing your story because it's really
inspiring. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You bet. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.